The 13-year-old girl was kicked out of her home due to her pregnancy, and years later, she returned to shock everyone. Hello, everyone. Enjoy these calming moments as you watch. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Sophia's father, Louis, thundered through the already stifling house. Sophia shrank back, unable to meet her father's gaze, staring at the ground. Her hands shook as they clutched the hem of her shirt. Shameless. Isabella, Sophia's mother, added venomously, her eyes lacking any empathy. So young and already pregnant. My God, how could I have given birth to someone like this? I didn't mean to, Sophia stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. Louis slammed his hand down on the table, causing the entire room to tremble. Do you know how much disgrace you've brought upon this family? Do you even comprehend what people outside will say? How can you even show your face in this town again? Why waste your breath on her, Louis? Isabella sneered. A girl like that doesn't deserve to stay here. Let her face the consequences herself. No, please, Mum, I'm begging you. Sophia lifted her tear-streaked face to plead with her mother, only to be met with a gaze as cold as ice. What are you still kneeling there for? Get out. Louis stood up abruptly, pointing towards the door. It felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath Sophia's feet. She stumbled back a few steps, her wide eyes filled with fear. I have nowhere to go. I don't know what to do, she whispered. That's your problem. Don't ever come back here. Louis turned his back on her as if she were a stranger. You're right. Keeping her here would only bring more shame to the family, Isabella said, her voice steady yet filled with disdain. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered, peering curiously into the house. Their prying eyes and murmurs buzzed like daggers in Sophia's back. Leave already. Louis shouted, his patience worn thin. Sophia turned and fled, tears streaming down. Her face, the rain began to pour, cold and heavy. She wandered aimlessly down the dark streets, her small feet muddied and frozen. Get out of here. This isn't a place for you. A middle-aged man with a harsh expression blocked the doorway of an abandoned house where Sophia sought shelter. I just need a place to stay for one night, Sophia pleaded, her voice choked. With tears get lost. I don't want any trouble. He slammed the door, leaving Sophia alone in the rain. She stumbled toward a nearby park, the cold benches becoming her last refuge as night fell. Sophia curled up on a bench, clutching her stomach as if to protect the tiny glimmer of hope growing within her. Hey girl, stop right there. A coarse voice called out, followed by malicious laughter. Sophia turned to see 3 figures emerging. From the shadows, their eyes filled with menace. What are you doing out here at this hour? We're looking for some fun, and you're perfect for it, one of them sneered, stepping closer with a wicked grin. Sophia couldn't speak, only backing away in fear. Don't run. Where do you think you're going? As Sophia bolted, her tears mixed with the rain, her heart pounding violently in her chest. The slippery ground threatened to trip her with every step, but the instinct to survive kept her moving. The sound of footsteps closing in was deafening, but by sheer luck, Sophia darted into a narrow alley and lost them. She collapsed, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Why does everyone hate me? Sophia whispered, her voice drowned by the rain. That night, she curled up under a tree in the park. The rain showed no mercy, seeping into her bones. She didn't know when she had fallen asleep. In her dreams, her parents appeared, but instead of love, they were filled with scorn and indifference. Sophia, you deserve this. Isabella's voice roared like thunder, jolting her awake. Sophia opened her eyes, her body aching from the cold. A high fever clouded her mind, and her lips were pale from the chill. Am I going to die here? The thought flitted through her mind, filling her with dread. Outside, the rain continued to pour, but Sophia no longer had the strength to resist. Everything blurred before her eyes. Child, what are you doing here? A warm, elderly voice broke through the haze. Sophia vaguely made out the silhouette of a woman leaning over her, a large umbrella shielding them both from the rain. I. Sophia couldn't summon the strength to respond and collapsed into the stranger's arms. Don't be afraid, poor child. I'll help you, the woman said, her aged hands gently lifting Sophia. Who are you? Sophia murmured, her eyes closing from exhaustion. I'm just an old baker, but you can't stay out here in the downpour. Margaret carried Sophia to her small bakery on the corner of the street. The house was modest but warm, filled with the comforting scent of pastry, stark contrast to the cold outside. Sit here. I'll get you some hot tea, Margaret said, placing Sophia on a chair. Her gaze was full of compassion as she looked at the drenched and shivering girl. For the first time in days, Sophia felt a glimmer of warmth from a stranger's. Kindness, yet deep down, the pain and hurt remained like an unhealed wound. The next morning, Sophia awoke on an old wooden chair in Margaret's bakery. Her head still throbbed from the fever she battled the night before. The aroma of freshly baked bread teased her senses, and her empty stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. You're awake. Here, have some warm milk, Margaret said gently, setting down a glass of milk and a small loaf of bread on the table. Her eyes were full of concern as she looked at the frail girl with a pale face. Thank you, Sophia whispered, her voice weak, but the weariness in her eyes remained. She wasn't accustomed to kindness, especially from a stranger. Don't worry. I don't need to know what happened, but it's clear you need help, Margaret said, her voice steady yet comforting. Eat, then rest some more. We'll talk later. Sophia picked up the bread, her hands trembling from hunger and fatigue. But as soon as it touched her lips, she felt a lump in her throat. The harsh words of her parents echoed in her mind. She put the bread down, tears silently streaming down her face. What's wrong? Margaret asked, sitting beside her. I don't deserve to eat. I'm the disgrace of my family, Sophia sobbed. Margaret remained silent for a moment, then gently took Sophia's frail hands in her own. Listen to me, child. No one deserves to be treated like that. I don't know what you've been through, but I know you're a good girl and you deserve to live. With Margaret's help, Sophia began assisting in the small bakery. Although the work wasn't too demanding, the judgmental stares of the neighborhood customers made her uneasy. Who's that girl? A woman whispered to Margaret, her expression filled with suspicion. She doesn't seem right. Don't let her ruin your reputation. Margaret dismissed her sharply. What I do is none of your business. If you don't like it, find another bakery. But not everyone was as kind-hearted as Margaret. One afternoon, as Sophia was wiping the tables, a man in a thick coat walked in. It was Esteban, the owner of the nearby grocery store, notorious for being miserly and nosy. Margaret, I need a word with you, Esteban said, casting a disapproving glance at Sophia. What is it, Esteban? That girl. He pointed directly at Sophia. Do you know who she is? I heard she was kicked out of her house for doing something shameful. Keeping her here is asking for trouble. Sophia kept her head down, trying not to cry. But the cruel words stabbed her heart like daggers. Margaret straightened her back, her gaze steely. Esteban, if you have nothing better to do, then leave. This girl hasn't harmed anyone, but you should think about your reputation. Who would want to buy bread from a bakery harboring someone like her? Get out of here, Esteban, and don't come back, Margaret said firmly, pointing to the door. Her unwavering gaze made it clear she wouldn't tolerate anyone hurting Sophia further. However, rumors began to spread throughout the neighborhood. That pregnant girl is living at Margaret's bakery. The whispers and scornful looks grew, increasingly unbearable. One evening, as Sophia stepped outside to take out the trash, she was cornered by a group of young men from the neighborhood. "Hey girl, who do you think you are living here?" A rough-looking man named Carlos shouted. I just want to live peacefully," Sophia stammered, stepping back. "Peacefully? Someone like you wants peace. You've already disgraced this place." Carlos snarled before shoving Sophia hard, causing her to fall to the ground. "Enough." Margaret's voice rang out from the bakery's entrance. She rushed over and helped Sophia to her feet. "If you don't know how to behave, then don't come here again," Carlos smirked. "Fine, but don't blame us when your bakery gets boycotted." Margaret ushered Sophia back inside, her elderly hands trembling with anger. "Don't listen to them, child. You've done nothing wrong." But Sophia remained silent, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know how much more she could endure. The mounting pressure forced Margaret to close the bakery for a few days, to avoid further trouble. During that time, Sophia tried to find work to help Margaret, but no one would hire her. "We don't need anyone else," said a restaurant owner, his contemptuous eyes glancing at her belly. "Please, give me a chance. I'll work hard," Sophia begged, only to be met with a dismissive shake of the head. Going from place to place, Sophia began to feel invisible, rejected by the entire world. One afternoon, when she returned to the bakery, she found Margaret sitting forlornly at the table, a pile of bills stacked in front of her. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, worried. Margaret sighed. "I don't know if I can keep this bakery open much longer. People are threatening to stop buying from me if you stay here." "I'll leave," Sophia said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to bring you any more trouble." Margaret looked at Sophia, her eyes filled with pain. "You foolish girl. You have nowhere else to go. I won't let you end up on the streets again." But in Sophia's heart, the thought of leaving Margaret grew stronger. She didn't want the kind woman to suffer because of her. That night, after tossing and turning, Sophia woke up with tired eyes and watched Margaret, who was still working tirelessly despite her age. Filled with gratitude, Sophia also felt overwhelming guilt. She knew her presence only added to Margaret's burdens. "I'm going to find a job. I don't want you to feel this pressure anymore," Sophia said quietly as Margaret prepared morning bread. "I've told you, Sophia, you don't need to worry. This is your home and you're not going anywhere," Margaret replied, her tone firm, but unable to hide her exhaustion. Still, Sophia was determined. She left the bakery and went from shop to shop in the neighborhood, looking for work. Her heart sank with each judgmental stare and dismissive shake of the head. "Are you looking for a job? How laughable," scoffed a middle-aged woman named Carmen, the owner of a sewing shop. "We don't hire people like you. Do yourself a favor and leave before you dirty my store." Sophia bit her lip, holding back tears. She bowed her head in thanks and quietly walked away. Each step felt heavier as she sank further into a world that seemed determined to reject her. That afternoon, as Sophia returned from selling flyers on the street for a meager amount of money, she heard shouting from the nearby market. She stole my wallet. There, that pregnant girl, an elderly woman, red-faced with anger, pointed straight at Sophia. A crowd began to gather, their curious and judgmental eyes all fixed on her. No, I didn't do it. I didn't take anything, Sophia cried, tears streaming down her face. She stepped back, but two men in the crowd stepped forward to block her way. Search her bag, someone suggested, their voice menacing. No, please don't. Sophia clutched her bag tightly, but her strength was no match, and a man ripped it from her hands. They rummaged through Sophia's bag but found nothing. The accusing woman, now flustered, tried to cover her embarrassment. She must have hidden it somewhere else. But someone like her surely isn't innocent. Sophia stood frozen, her whole body trembling with a mix of anger and fear. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement with the woman's baseless accusations. Get out of here before I call the police, the woman shouted, pointing at Sophia. Sophia turned and ran, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't understand why people were so cruel. Just because she was different, just because she carried a tiny life inside her, the whole world seemed intent on crushing her spirit. When Sophia returned to the bakery, Margaret was waiting with a worried expression. What happened, child? Why are you crying like this? Sophia could no longer hold it in. She collapsed into Margaret's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't do anything wrong, but they still hate me. They treat me like trash. I can't take it anymore. Margaret gently stroked Sophia's hair, trying to comfort her. You foolish child, you must stay strong. Don't let them break you. But Sophia only shook her head, the pain and despair deeply embedded in her soul. The next day, Margaret had to leave the bakery to meet the landlord about overdue rent. Sophia stayed behind, trying to work but unable to shake her unease. Carlos and the neighborhood boys' threats still haunted her, while Sophia was cleaning a table. The bakery door suddenly swung open. Carlos and two of his friends entered, their faces full of mischief. Hey there, little girl. How's the bakery doing today? Carlos sneered. What do you want? Sophia asked, trying to stay calm. What do we want? Oh, we're just checking in on you. I heard old lady Margaret is out, so it's just you here, right? Carlos smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. Please, leave. This isn't a place for trouble, Sophia said, her voice trembling. Carlos laughed loudly. Trouble? We're just here to help. But with that attitude, maybe you don't want any help. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with sinister intent. But hey, do you think the baby in your belly will have a good life? Sophia backed away in fear, instinctively wrapping her arms around her stomach to protect the child. Go away, I'll call the police. Oh, go ahead, Carlos mocked. But do you think the police will believe you? A girl like you, with no home and no family. Sophia couldn't respond. She stood frozen, her entire body trembling with fear and anger. At that moment, a familiar voice rang out from the doorway. Get out of here, immediately. Margaret appeared, holding a broom, her sharp eyes fixed on Carlos and his friends. Carlos smirked. Fine, but remember this, old lady, your bakery won't stay safe for long. He left, but his threats lingered in the air, deepening Sophia's despair. After chasing the boys away, Margaret sat down beside Sophia, her eyes full of sympathy. But Sophia kept her head down, clutching her stomach and whispering, I don't know how I can keep going. You must keep going, Margaret said firmly. You're not just living for yourself. You're living for the child inside you. Don't let them win. But deep down, Sophia felt as though everything was slipping out of her control. She didn't know how much more she could endure. Sophia woke up after a night full of nightmares. Although Margaret's small bakery was warm and cozy, the sense of safety it provided was slowly eroding under the weight of hostile stares and cruel gossip from the neighborhood. Sophia, take the day off today. Don't go outside, Margaret said as she prepared dough for the bread. She had noticed Sophia growing increasingly withdrawn, her eyes constantly reflecting worry and fear. I can't just sit still. I need to do something to help you, Sophia murmured, fiddling with a cleaning cloth. But deep inside, she was terrified of stepping outside and facing a world full of scornful gazers. You silly girl, don't worry about me. You need to take care of yourself first, Margaret said, her tone gentle but firm. Even so, Sophia was determined. That afternoon, while running errands to buy some supplies for Margaret, Sophia encountered Isabella, a middle-aged woman who sold vegetables at the corner market. Isabella was well known for stirring up trouble and gossiping. Well, Sophia, you're still here, huh? Isabella said mockingly as she spotted Sophia hesitantly approaching her stall. I just want to buy some vegetables, Sophia said softly, avoiding Isabella's gaze. You still have the nerve to show your face around here. I thought you'd have disappeared by now, Isabella continued, her tone full of contempt. The people around began to take notice, their curious eyes turning toward Sophia. I don't want to cause trouble. I just need a few things. Sophia stepped back, trying to avoid the daggers of judgment stabbing at her soul. You think you're not causing trouble with that belly? You've disgraced this entire neighborhood. Isabella snapped, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't say that. I just want to live in peace, Sophia said, her voice trembling, but her plea only seemed to anger Isabella further. Peace? Someone like you wants peace. You're just a child who couldn't control herself, and now you expect everyone else to deal with the shame you bring. Isabella shouted, drawing laughter and ridicule from the surrounding crowd. Sophia couldn't take it anymore. She turned and ran, leaving behind the gears and laughter. Each step felt heavier, as if she were carrying the weight of the world's disdain. That evening, while cleaning up the bakery, the door suddenly swung open. 3 unfamiliar men stepped in, their faces menacing. Sophia immediately recognized one of them as Carlos, who had threatened her before. Where's Margaret? Carlos asked, his voice cold. She's not here, Sophia replied, trying to maintain her composure. Good. Then we'll just talk to you, Carlos said, moving closer to Sophia with a threatening gaze. You think you can live here peacefully? We already told you this place doesn't welcome you. Please. I just want to work. I don't want to cause any trouble, Sophia pleaded. Trouble? You are trouble. Ever since you showed up, this neighborhood has been full of rumors. We've lost customers because of this bakery sheltering you, Carlos shouted, slamming his hand. Down on the counter, Sophia flinched and backed away in fear as the 2 men with him began tossing everything off the counter onto the floor. Freshly baked bread fell and crumbled, flour and ingredients spilling everywhere. Stop. Please don't do this, Sophia cried, tears streaming down her face. But Carlos only laughed. This is your lesson. Get out of here before things get worse. He and his companions left, leaving Sophia amidst the wreckage. She collapsed onto the floor, her trembling hands picking up broken pieces of bread as tears flowed freely down her cheeks. When Margaret returned, she was horrified to see the state of the bakery. What happened here? I can't stay here anymore, Sophia said, her voice choking with tears. "I'm only bringing you trouble." Margaret gripped Sophia's shoulders tightly, her eyes filled with determination. "You're not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Sophia knew deep down that Margaret was growing more weary, and she couldn't bear the feeling of being a burden any longer. 2 days later, Margaret received a notice from the landlord. The bakery would be repossessed if she didn't pay the overdue rent within a week. She tried to hide her worry from Sophia, but the sadness in her eyes was impossible to conceal. "I'll leave," Sophia said, tears welling up. "If I'm not here, maybe people will leave you alone." "You're not going anywhere, Sophia," Margaret said firmly. "I've told you this is your home." But Sophia knew her presence had ruined everything good for Margaret that night. When everything was quiet, Sophia stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy with pain. "I have to leave, for her sake and for Anna's," she thought, placing her hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny life moving inside her. "I'm sorry, Anna, but I can't stay here forever." The next morning, Sophia woke up earlier than usual. She packed the few belongings she had into an old bag, looking at Margaret still sound asleep in the corner of the room. Sophia fought back tears. She couldn't let her suffer any longer. She wrote a short note and left it on the table. "Dear Margaret, I am so grateful for everything you've done for me, but I can't stay here and cause you more trouble. I will find somewhere else to live, and I hope people will stop pressuring you. I love you very much." Taking one last look, Sophia placed her hand on her stomach. "Anna, we have to be strong because no one else will help us." She stepped outside, quietly closing the door behind her, leaving the bakery in silence. Sophia wandered the streets, eventually finding a cheap boarding house on the outskirts of town where no one cared who she was. But with the little money she had, she could only afford a few nights. Room number 3. "Don't bother me if you can't pay up." The landlord, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, said curtly as she tossed Sophia the key. The room was small, dark, and damp. Sophia sat on the bed, tears threatening to fall as she thought of Margaret and the warmth of the bakery. But now, it was just her and Anna. "We'll be okay," Sophia whispered to herself, though she didn't believe it. On her first day at the boarding house, Sophia went out looking for work, but every place she approached rejected her outright. "No vacancies, you're too young, we don't want trouble." The familiar words stabbed at Sophia's heart. She knew her growing belly made her an easy target for judgment and rejection. When she returned, she found a group of children from the boarding house gathered near her door, pointing and laughing. "Look at her belly, it's like a big balloon," one boy shouted, and the others roared with laughter. "She must be a bad person if her family kicked her out," another added with cruel delight. "Stop it, you can't say that." Sophia tried to explain, but her protests only made them laugh louder at her helplessness. That night, Sophia lay in the dark room, holding her belly, trying to lull both herself and Anna to sleep. But the echo of their mocking laughter and hateful words played over and over in her mind like an unending nightmare the next morning. Sophia tried to leave early to avoid seeing anyone, but Dolores was already waiting outside her door, her face cold and accusatory. "You stole from me, didn't you?" Dolores said loudly, her tone sharp. "No, I didn't take anything." Sophia stepped back in shock. "I would never steal. Then why is the money in my drawer missing since you arrived?" Dolores crossed her arms, her voice growing harsher. "I don't know. I swear I didn't take it." Sophia's voice cracked with desperation, her eyes filling with tears. Don't make excuses. You have 24 hours to pay or get out of here. I won't keep a thief in my house, Dolores shouted, drawing the attention of the other tenants. Sophia could only lower her head, tears streaming down her face. The accusations made everyone in the boarding house whisper among themselves. It felt as though the entire world was against her. That night, when Sophia returned to her room, she found the door wide open. Inside, everything was ransacked, her meager belongings scattered across the floor. Is anyone here? Sophia called out, her voice trembling. But there was no response. She stepped inside and saw that her small pouch of money was gone. No, this can't be. Sophia cried out, tears streaming down her face. She ran out to find Dolores to report the theft, but before she could explain, Dolores cut her off. It's you again. Don't try to blame anyone else. You did this. To yourself, Dolores shouted, leaving Sophia speechless and unable to defend herself. Overcome with helplessness, Sophia quietly returned to her room. She knew no one believed her. No one would stand by her in the cold, dark room. Sophia clutched her belly and sobbed. I'm sorry, Anna. I couldn't protect you. Where will we go now? What are we going to do? But there was no answer. All Sophia could hear was the howling wind seeping through the cracks in the door, a cruel reminder of her complete isolation. The next morning, Sophia left the boarding house quietly, carrying her few belongings in a worn fabric bag. The sound of the keys jangling as she returned them to Dolores was met with indifference. The middle-aged woman didn't even look at her, only waving her off. Sophia kept her head down, feeling the cold stares from those around her. She wandered through familiar streets that now felt alien, as though every path rejected her presence. Her stomach growled with hunger, her legs ached, and she leaned against an old brick wall, gasping for breath. The icy wind cut through her thin coat, leaving her shivering uncontrollably. She reached an old market corner where, in the past, a few kind strangers had given her leftover food, but today no one seemed to notice her. Sophia stood by the stalls, lit with warm lights, the smell of freshly baked bread making her stomach twist in hunger. She hesitated, summoning her courage. Excuse me, do you have any leftover food? Sophia asked softly, her voice hoarse, from the cold and exhaustion. The woman behind the stall glanced at Sophia with disdain. I don't have anything for you. Go somewhere else. Sophia bowed her head in thanks, despite the humiliation flooding her chest, and walked away, her eyes fixed on the ground, unwilling to meet the judgmental gazes of those around her. At a small park, Sophia sat on a bench, cradling her belly as silent tears streamed down her face. Anna, I'm sorry. What did I do wrong for us to suffer like this? Suddenly, a group of children passed by, their laughter jolting Sophia from her thoughts. A young boy in the group stopped, staring at Sophia's belly, and called out loudly, Look, she's so fat. The group burst into laughter, and another child threw a small stone in Sophia's direction, but she only bowed her head and endured it, tears continuing to roll down her cheeks as her heart twisted in anguish at the cruelty of the world around her. As night fell, Sophia continued to wander aimlessly. She found a secluded corner among abandoned buildings and curled up to shield herself from the cold wind. But even with her eyes shut tight, sleep wouldn't come. The growling of her empty stomach and the howling wind through the cracks seemed to remind her that she had been utterly abandoned by the world, when everything seemed utterly hopeless. Sophia heard footsteps in the distance. At first, she dismissed them, assuming it was just a passerby. But the footsteps grew closer, stopping right in front of her. Sophia, she looked up, her eyes swollen from crying. Standing before her was Margaret, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She was panting, holding a flashlight and an old umbrella. "Margaret," Sophia gasped, her voice breaking. "You foolish child. You scared me half to death. I've been searching everywhere for you." Margaret knelt before Sophia, her frail hands trembling as she touched Sophia's face. "Why did you leave like that?" I didn't want to make you suffer anymore," Sophia sobbed, tears flowing like a flood. Margaret pulled Sophia into her arms, holding her tightly as if afraid of losing her again. "Don't you understand, Sophia? You are my family. I would never leave you, no matter what happens." The two of them embraced in the cold darkness, Sophia's cries blending with the faint drizzle of rain. Both of them trembled, but in Margaret's arms, Sophia felt a warmth she thought she would never feel again. "I've told you before, Sophia, you don't have to worry. We'll get through this together," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. Sophia nodded, her tear-streaked eyes looking at Margaret. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving without telling you. Don't say anything more. All that matters is that you're safe," Margaret said, her frail hands radiating warmth as she held Sophia close. The next morning, the two of them returned to the small bakery. Though life was still difficult for Sophia, it now felt like a true home. Margaret began tidying up the bakery, carefully wiping away the dust that had gathered during their absence. Sophia helped her bake bread, her small hands gradually becoming familiar with the tasks. "I'll help you, Margaret. We'll make things better," she said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Margaret smiled, her first genuine smile in days. "That's right, Sophia. We'll be fine as long as we have each other. Nothing can bring us down." As time passed, despite the judgmental stares and whispered gossip from the neighbors, Sophia gradually learned to ignore them. She focused on her work and caring for Anna, the tiny life growing inside her. The little bakery once again filled, the air with its familiar aroma, drawing old customers back. Sophia stood behind the counter, her eyes shining with hope for the future. "Thank you, Margaret," she said, looking at the elderly woman who had been so strong for her. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Margaret gently patted Sophia's hand, her eyes filled with love. "You're my family, Sophia. Family sticks together no matter what." Under that small roof, the two of them lived a simple yet peaceful life, relying on each other to overcome life's challenges. 13 years passed since the night Sophia left her parents' house. Now she was a strong and independent woman. With Margaret's help, she had overcome unimaginable hardships and opened a small cafe on the outskirts of Miami. The cafe was named Anna, after her daughter, who had become the greatest pride of her life. Anna, now 13 years old, was a reflection of Sophia's younger self, but with eyes full of intelligence and confidence. She often helped her mother in the cafe, serving customers with a bright smile. One morning, as Sophia was cleaning the cafe counter, a customer walked in. It was Julia, an old friend of Margaret, carrying a few old photographs of her from her youth. "Julia," Sophia exclaimed, recognizing her cheerful and lively friend, now in her 60s. "I found these photos while cleaning up at home. Look at how beautiful Margaret was in her youth." Julia placed the photographs on the table, her eyes shimmering with nostalgia. Sophia smiled and bent down to look at the pictures. "But Margaret was the most incredible person I've ever known. If it weren't for her, Anna and I wouldn't be here today. Anna ran out from the pastry counter, curious about the pictures. Is this be Margaret, Mum? I've never seen photos. Of her when she was young, yes, my love. She did so much for me and for you, Sophia said, her voice warm as she gently stroked her daughter's hair, her heart filled with gratitude for the woman who had saved her during her darkest days. Suddenly, the cafe doorbell chimed. Sophia looked up and froze in place. An elderly woman with a frail figure, silver hair, and a face lined with wrinkles stepped inside. Her eyes carried wariness and hesitation, but deep within them was a familiarity Sophia couldn't mistake. Isabella, Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. The woman nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Yes, Sophia, it's me, your mother. The atmosphere in the cafe suddenly grew heavy. Julia, sensing the tension, quietly stepped back. Anna looked at her mother, then at the unfamiliar woman, her eyes filled with curiosity but not understanding. What was happening? Sophia tried to compose herself, her voice colder than ever. What are you doing here after 13 years? You think you can just walk into my life as if nothing ever happened? Isabella lowered her head, her voice hoarse. I know. I have no right, but I can't continue living with this guilt. I came to apologize. Sophia let out a bitter laugh, but tears began to well up in her eyes. You threw me out on the streets without a shred of compassion. You chose the family's honor over the daughter you gave birth to. And now, you think a simple apology can fix everything. Anna tugged at her mother's hand, her wide eyes full of confusion. Mum, what's going on? Who is she? Sophia remained silent for a long time, her hands clenched so tightly they turned white. Anna, this is your grandmother. Grandmother, Anna said in surprise, turning to Isabella. Is that true? Are you my mum's mother? Isabella knelt down, her eyes filled with remorse as she looked at Anna. Yes, my dear. I am your mother's mother, and I made terrible mistakes. I abandoned her when she needed me most, but I can't go on living without trying to make things right. Anna stepped back, looking at her mother with a bewildered expression. Mom, is this true? Why did she leave you? Sophia bent down and embraced Anna tightly. I'll explain everything to you, but not now. Isabella stood up, her hands trembling. Sophia, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. It's not that easy, Sophia said, her voice filled with pain. 13 years is not a short time. I built myself up from nothing. You weren't there when I needed you. Now I don't know if there's anything you can do to change that. Julia, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward and placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia, your mother was wrong. No one denies that, but sometimes forgiveness isn't for others. It's to free yourself. Sophia looked at Julia, then at Isabella. Conflicting emotions churned within her. Anger, pain, and a vulnerability she didn't want to admit. Mrs. Isabella, Anna suddenly spoke, her voice clear but firm. I don't know what you've done, but I think if you truly regret it, you need to prove it through actions, not just words. Isabella looked at Anna, her eyes glimmering with a faint glimmer of hope. You're right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. Isabella knelt down, taking Sophia's hands and her own tears streaming down her haggard face. I've lived with regret for the past 13 years, she choked out. Your father fell ill after you left. He never stopped agonizing over what happened, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it, and now he's gone. Sophia froze, as though a storm had just swept through her mind. "Father is dead," she asked, her voice cracking. "Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why are you only coming to me now?" Isabella gripped her daughter's hands tightly, her own shaking. "I didn't dare. I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. But when he passed, I realized I couldn't bear to lose you too. Sophia, you're all I have left." Sophia pulled her hands away, stepping back. "All you have left? Do you think saying a few words of regret is enough? Father threw me out, and you turned your back on me. For 13 years, I've had to survive on my own, raise my child on my own, and now you want forgiveness because you feel lonely." Isabella couldn't hold back her tears, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm here now. I want to be a part of your life again." Sophia looked at her mother, her heart torn between anger and a flicker of hope. "You think it's that simple? You left me when I needed you most. I had to fight for every moment of happiness in my life, and now you want to waltz back in." Anna, watching the exchange, stepped forward. "Mum, maybe we can give her a chance. If she really wants to change, shouldn't we at least hear her out?" Sophia turned to her daughter, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Anna, it's not that easy. You don't know the pain she caused me." "I know you've been through a lot, Mum," Anna replied softly, "but maybe we can start with small steps. You deserve to decide what to do next." Margaret, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. "Sophia, forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It takes time. You don't have to rush into anything, but it's okay to listen." Sophia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her emotions. "You want to be a part of my life? Then show me you're serious. Actions speak louder than words." Isabella nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I will do whatever it takes. I want to help you and Anna. I want to make up for lost time." "Then start by being present," Sophia said, her voice steady. "Come by the cafe and help out. Show me you care about us, not just about easing your own guilt." Isabella wiped her tears, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I will. I promise to be there for both of you." As the tension in the cafe began to ease, Anna smiled at her mother. Maybe this could be a new beginning for all of us. Sophia looked at her daughter, then at Isabella. "It won't be easy, and it will take time. But if you're willing to try, then I'll give you that chance." With a tentative smile, Isabella nodded. "Thank you, Sophia. I won't let you down this time." As they stood in the cafe surrounded by warmth and the scent of freshly baked bread, a new chapter began for Sophia, Anna, and Isabella. It wouldn't be without its challenges, but they were ready to face them together. And so, the story of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of family continued, with hope lighting the way forward.